Hi, folks. Is everybody finding their way in? Yes, some people are muted because they know how to do this.
How you doing?
Eric.
How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Yeah.
Looks like there's a bunch of folks coming in. That's great. I'm going to just kind of keep letting people in if that's okay. We'll wait for a few extra minutes just to try to start with everybody. And then as people join in, you won't see them primarily, Barry. You'll just kind of hear the comings and goings.
The comings and goings. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to watch the comings and goings because that's just a distraction if you're not used to this. I think that's the hard part, is just getting accustomed.
Right. Well, it's considering, as I say, it's first time using Zoom, right? So
yeah, exactly. Well, and honestly, you're doing great so far.
Well, and by the way, I came up with a British cocktail, just so you know.
Good job. I'm very impressed. What did you come up with?
Shandy.
That is the perfect thing.
Yeah, which is a combination of beer and
ginger ale. I know. I drank them myself for many a year at the Rose and Crown in downtown Calgary while in art school.
Is that still there?
I think it is.
Okay.
It was my art school haunt for many a year.
High school?
No, art school.
Okay.
I was at ACAD, and it was lager and lime or shandies.
Right.
Lager and lime was kind of another thing of the time.
Well, this goes a lot further, right? It just goes a lot further.
Oh, it sure does. And you don't feel quite as terrible as you go along. I'm going to start in a minute. I think we've got a fair amount of people in. And so I'm also toasting you with a glass of wine. We consider this the COVID and post-COVID version of an opening. So raise a glass. That's it. Everyone raise a glass with the artist.
Cheers.
Welcome, everybody. This is our Zoom cocktail hour. If you haven't attended before, we've been doing this for the last 19 months. I've completed 20 really great Zoom cocktail hours with artists who have been very adaptable to this version. And we are back to real openings as well. But there was a lot of folks who didn't want to give this up because it gave them a great opportunity to join in if they couldn't be in Canmore. So we're feeling great to continue the tradition now. And Barry is a newbie to Zoom. He told me today he had never been on Zoom. My God. And so you're gonna have to bear with all of us if there's any technical issues, but right now I think, we'll play it through. The regular format for this hour is just a brief introduction to the artist and then my infamous 35 questions. So I developed a really fun format where it's 35 rapid fire questions, none of them having really anything to do with the last question. So it keeps the artist agile, and it becomes very expositive of who we are to have to answer those questions quickly without thinking too hard about it, and without sort of resting on one idea too long. And so we're going to run through those. It's about 20-25 minutes usually to get through all the 35 questions. And then Barry's going to show you some of the work from his exhibition opening Saturday at the gallery between 2 and 5 p.m. So I hope you'll join. It would be great to see people in person. Canmore is busy, but not crazy. So we would welcome you and have a glass of wine with us. They are not the openings of old where there's food lying everywhere, but we are definitely in a comfortable, airy space where you can enjoy the opening live. So please do join us if you can. And we'll just go on after Barry's run through some of the images from the show and gives you a little bit of an insight into where they've come from, to questions. So then I'll open up the floor to questions. We won't moderate it. We'll just see how it all goes. So if everybody's ready, I think we will start. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the artist. Now, this is terrible, but I am actually reading this because it's a very concise biography. So I'm going to just read it. Barry was born in a working class family and raised in the government tenement housing projects of Northern England in the mill town of Lancaster. At the age of 12, he immigrated to North America with his family and began an intense 4-year apprenticeship program under Hungarian master painter. Later completed his education with a BFA from the University of Lethbridge. As well as being an artist, Barry has been an editor-in-chief of an arts magazine, an educator, and more recently a curator of a contemporary art space. Barry lives and works in Calgary, Alberta, where he keeps a full-time studio and shows his work in Canada and the US. His work is found in private and public collections around the world. So that's the Coles Notes version of who this man is. But now, my infamous 35 questions are going to give you a little more insight into who this man is. So, Barry, are you ready?
No.
Oh, all right, we're going. We're take a sip of your shandy and we're going forward.
Yeah.
Describe a color that you cannot be without.
Orange. And lately it's a different kind of orange. I've switched from the really artificial, transparent orange to more of an opaque, muted orange. So the orange.
What are you muting it down with? Is it with
I'm
gray?
not. I'm color swatching everything.
Ah.
Yeah, I don't unless I switch over to oil when I'm glazing on top, I don't blend. I just go through the color swatches. So
I had no
more
idea.
time in the hardware store than I do in the art supply store.
I love it. And again, this is expositive. I didn't even know. I thought you were blending down to get those color changes. Who taught the first drawing class that you ever took?
Well, it would have been my apprenticeship with Sandor. The Hungarian master was Sandor Mazaris, and he studied in Budapest.
And what age were you?
I would have been 15. Before that, I was drawing on my own, but you know, an actual class or learning,
yeah,
would have been 15. Yeah.
What's the one bad habit you wish you could give up?
Let me take a drink.
I know.
That would be it.
Okay, good enough. That's all you need to say, really. Coffee or tea drinker?
Oh, coffee, Americano. Well,
A lot of coffee?
a lot of coffee, like 2 a day at least, and it's got to be iced Americano, nothing in it. Yeah.
Interesting. Tell me where you grew up, even though I introduced it. Give everyone a picture.
I grew up in Lancaster, which is in northern England, just lower than the Lake District, which is beautiful, which is kind of a contrast to all the row houses. And the funny thing about the row houses in Lancaster, at the end of the street, there was a river, and on top of the river was a castle, the original castle. And it was such a contradiction. It was wonderful. You have the history with the contemporary. And I was saying to Don earlier about, I'm not a religious person, but we were brought up Protestant. And then you had the rival gang, which was the Catholics, just across the street. And they actually had a brick wall between the two of us.
Really?
Yeah, and on top of the wall, they would have glass embedded and barbed wire. So they took it quite seriously to keep us apart.
Clearly.
We found ways.
What's the single, here, this leads right in. What's the single most important thing that you learned in high school?
Well, single.
Most important thing you learned?
Yeah, that's pretty tough. I mean, balance. It sounds weird, but balance, because we immigrated to Canada, stayed a year, and then immigrated to Houston, Texas, and then immigrated back to Canada, moved across Canada, and you were always looking for like stability.
Yeah.
And then I found it, funny enough, in the art teachers when I was in junior high, and just kind of gave me an identity.
Finding balance.
Yeah.
In high school, it's almost one of the last things I would have anticipated too. So that's fantastic. What's the last in-person art exhibition you attended? It's a COVID question, honestly.
Yeah, I know, and now it's been so long, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I think I would have been at Neverland, and there was also and I can't remember the name of it, probably have it written down somewhere. There's a young group just starting up. This was maybe a month ago, and it's something like Third Eye Collective, and it's a bunch of young artists just starting out, and it's in the north part of Calgary. So I went there I love seeing new art. I love
Me too. And it's been so long since that experience was normal to
Right.
go and see a real show that it just getting back into it. It's a great kind of question for people to hearken back to wherever they've been,
Right.
what was the last like real art gathering you went to? Was
Yeah.
your academic art training valuable?
Are we talking university?
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Okay, both. I want to know both.
Okay. My undergrad, I was very fortunate. I was going to school at a time where Jeff Spaulding, Janet Cardiff, Doug Kurt, and Billy McCarroll were teaching.
Yeah.
And they treated me as an equal, and it was a wonderful experience. And then I went to grad school out east, and it was the complete opposite.
Where'd you go to grad school?
University of Waterloo.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a terrible experience. I mean, I've made friends for life out there. And I think it had something to do with the most of the faculty were retiring at the time, and they just didn't care. That's the best way I can put it. But so it was a poor experience.
What did it leave you with? What did that leave you with coming out of a master's degree?
Well, here's the thing. After the master's, I actually seriously thought of giving it all up because it just drained the soul.
Yeah.
But then I had this experience or this offer to paint a mural for the Mustard Seed here in Calgary.
Yes.
So I decided to dedicate a year out of my life to actually make this mural for them. And they were trying to raise $2.5 million for their new arts building. And I just donated my time for that year. And then the people that were helping me and the people that were inspired by this a lot of them were their clients as well. And it made me understand that art itself can have a purpose.
Yeah.
And it just made it worthwhile again. And I knew from that point on that I had to do this for the rest of my life.
Well, and then back to the question of balance, right? It's about that. The academics seem necessary, and then the balance is what am I actually doing this for? Tell me, who do you seek out most for critique?
Oh, I don't. I always, I think, I mean, I figured it out. We were talking about the apprenticeship program, and I just turned 60. So I've been doing this for a very long time. And at some point you look in the mirror and you recognize that you're the one now that is becoming the mentor for others. Right. And so I have all this experience, and I'm my own worst critic, and I will, you've seen my work, and it'll change and it'll move forward. And I'm always challenging myself. I mean, I look to other artists. I mean, there's a couple of artists I see now that I love their work, and I look to other artists. That's why I did curating, and that's why I did the Arts magazine, because I absolutely love art. So I'll look at art and then I'll maybe pick things up, but not so much critique. I mean, I go to myself for that because it's my work, so I better be responsible.
Absolutely. Tell me one object in your life existing that you want to ensure is passed on to your children.
Because we left England when I was 12, and there was the 6 of us, my mother, father, and my 3 brothers, we pretty well left our family behind. And you know the story about how my father changed his last name when he went on to become a singer. So we don't have that history anymore. And he gave me his gold St. Christopher watch.
Oh.
And I keep that with me, and I'm passing it on to my son. And then I've already got my grandson, Graham, has already also picked out, like, okay, this is where it's going, that particular object.
It's so, again, such an expositive idea. Do you keep things that need to go on? Does it tell a story of your family?
Mm-hmm.
Where in the world was the first real, I say real carefully, but real art gallery that you visited?
Wow. The Vancouver Art Gallery. I saw, because I'd been copying from books in my apprenticeship program, there was a Rembrandt exhibition. And I think that's probably what influenced it. I mean, it was, by the way, the Vancouver Art Gallery is a beautiful gallery.
Yeah.
You know, and such amazing art. And
truly.
yeah, and so that would be the first.
What's the longest stretch of time that you ever spent completely alone in the studio working?
Was the longest stretch of time.
Yeah,
Well, just waking up on the floor the next morning, passed out, count as a
that
long time.
counts. Totally counts. That's why I wanted to ask the
I
question.
was working with tar at the time, roofing tar. As you see, a lot of my work with the black figures are actually roofing tar. And I'd been painting all day. And then I woke up in the morning on my studio floor, and you could actually see the brushstroke go right down the panel.
Oh, God.
So it was a gradual fall. It wasn't a complete fall.
It is a marker of time, a marker of time. Which sense do you depend on the most? Sight, sound, or smell?
Which sense?
Yeah.
It's tough because I think the senses are so connected. I would say sight. I mean, I'm starting to lose my hearing, but my smell has improved. I don't know. So I would say, I mean, I'm such a person about language and vocabulary.
Yeah.
So can I say talking?
Oh, it is absolutely. Yeah. What's your current most overused word on the note of talking?
On the note of talking, most overused word. My problem is I invent words and then I forget what the word was. My daughter will remind me. Like I think fabtabulous was another one I just used. And she's like, that doesn't exist, Dad. Like, stop using that word. So yeah, overused words are the ones I make up.
How did you discover the distinctive style that now you're calling yours, the building icons into a narrative? Where did it click for you? Was it before school, after school, somewhere in between?
This is a bit of a long story, but so because it was so rough, the environment, I would often skip out of school and home and everything else. And I would go to a little village called Hesham. And there were these old guys at the bar, and this is 10 or 12 years old, keep in mind. And I would go over and I'd listen to their stories, and they'd invite me in, and we'd have nettle beer and their wives were saying that boys should be in school and all this stuff. But I love listening to their stories. And then my nan, she had a boarding house, and we would sit, play dominoes, but her boarders would have these amazing stories from all over the world. And they would bring as payment exotic animals. And it was just an amazing experience. So I've always been about storytelling, but I didn't want to tell a story where it's just as it is, because that's already been said. And art is about the possibilities of everything. And so I wanted to shorthand it so that people who looked at it could create meaning themselves when they were looking at the work. So it was a very gradual thing where it's less and less something very specific, and it becomes more iconic. So it's been over the years, but it's always about storytelling.
Was there a moment that you said, this is mine? This is uniquely, completely mine?
Every morning when I look in the mirror, that's all I say to myself.
That's it. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received from anyone? I don't care, art or not.
Time. Like I've talked to other artists, and they'll ask, well, how do you get to this point? And we know, the artists that are watching too know this is time and dedication, but you can't rush time. Like
Yeah.
you have to wait, and you have to accept it, that this is the journey to get there. Because if you look back at when you were 21 and the decisions you were making art-wise, we won't talk about life right now, but art-wise,
Yeah.
right? And then compared to the decisions you're making now, that is time and experience. So you've got to be patient and let the time develop so that your work develops.
This is so good. You know that this is being recorded, right? So other people can enjoy it later, because it's a great conversation. Tell me your earliest memory as a child. These are all over the place. I'm trying to take you everywhere.
The earliest memories of a child. Well, I mentioned a couple already. I think one of the things, as I said, my dad was the president of the Manchester United Supporters Club. So I was raised in that culture.
Yeah.
I call it the hooligan culture.
Mhm.
But going to the game and then being put on his shoulders so that I could see what are now classified as legends. And just that experience was so foreign in comparison to where I was living and where I was at.
Yeah.
So that would be probably one of my most favorite childhood memories.
I'm going to ask you about 3 very well represented icons in your work. So I'm going to say it and then just give us a quick story. Cherries.
Cherries, for me,
Yeah.
as I said, this is for me because people are going to interpret it the wrong way. They've always been a symbol of decadence and also a release from just traditional. Like there's different ways that I paint the cherries, so it changes.
Yeah.
When I paint them flat, I try to objectify them and make it part of the whole work. And then I'll sometimes paint them in a very encaustic way. And that then becomes more about the cherries themselves and what they are.
Great. Pork chops.
Pork chops. Reference to Roy Lichtenstein, because of my education as apprentice, I had to study all these artists. So Lichtenstein and his chops, I just loved those. But for me, it was about the idea again of time and decay, and it only lasts for a certain period of time. So it's not something that's permanent. So when you put it as a painting, and you put it, you're trying to create that idea of less permanence. So that's what the chop is for me.
So I don't know if these two are divisible, but Charlie Chuckles and his pipes, his pipe.
Yeah.
Always are they separated ever?
Yeah, they have been. I mean, the old man and the hat. I mean, I've got a couple here behind me right now.
Yeah, no, I know. And I wanted to pick the ones that kind of I can reference as we go along.
Yeah, those ones behind, the Charlie Chuckles with the banana antlers and the mouth and everything else. But yeah, no, Charlie Chuckles is a happy-go-lucky character in England. It's just that, like when someone's having a good time, you'll say, "Hey, look, there's Charlie Chuckles."
Didn't know.
It's just an expression.
And the pipe part of him all the time, the pipe.
Yeah, the pipe for me is, as I said, meeting those old guys, and we don't do it anymore, but it's the storytelling. Right. It's the idea of storytelling and taking time and enjoying the pipe. So that's what the pipe is for me.
How would you describe your singing voice, Barry?
Singing voice is actually really good.
Is it?
Most
people I know are just like, oh, it's terrible. Okay,
I'm also very delusional, so
we may make you sing, so don't even.
I never sang. I mean, I sang. My dad and mom ran a pub in England for a while, so they would bring me up on stage because my dad was an actual singer. So he would bring me up on stage, and I would sing with him, like Engelbert Humperdinck songs, Frank Sinatra songs, and all the old. So that's why I did it, and I wasn't afraid after that, right, of facing my fears because you're in the crowd. But just to go back that for a second, my father, my last name, by the way, is Longhorn. It's not actually Lorne. That's the family name. But he dropped that and changed it to Lorne when he went on stage as a singer. And he was his claim to fame was being on the same bill as Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. So he was a proper singer. But I didn't want to sing because that was his thing. So I did my own thing.
And never after. It didn't ever.
No. Oh. In fact, I've been asked not to anymore. So I don't know what that means.
I don't know what's the matter with that. Have you ever had a profession outside the art world? Another profession entirely?
Yeah. Just to support myself as an artist, I was a qualified welder.
Oh.
So welding and also real estate. I worked for Royal LePage and then developed quite a portfolio of my own real estate.
I had no idea about that one. And we've talked a lot. This leads into what's the worst job you've ever had in history?
Chicken catching.
Oh.
In a barn, 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to catch 3 chickens in each hand and then delivering them, and then realizing that you've only got 2.5 chickens in one because one had rotted. And you're like, I don't want to do this job anymore. But I was a teenager, so.
No, well, and that definitely describes worst.
That's the worst job ever.
Who discouraged you the most from a career in art?
My mother.
Really?
Yeah, my mother. That had everything to do with my father and their relationship and him, and I think the relationship was challenged often because of his career.
Yeah.
And it wasn't seen as a worthwhile thing. Again, remember the Protestant work ethic, right? Being raised that way and working class, frivolous. The closest she got to enjoyment of art is when she worked at the wallpaper factory. And at the end of the month, it discontinued. She would bring a roll home and we'd put it over the fireplace, hang it over the fireplace, and we'd all stare at it like, wow, it's the most amazing art we've ever seen.
That's fantastic. That's a
That's why the
beautiful
wallpaper's in my work as well, by the way. That's why the wallpaper's in my work.
I was going to say this series actually you engaged the wallpaper, which is
Yeah.
beautiful. Tell me about the last painting that you purchased from another artist.
I purchased a photograph.
Traded or purchased, whichever.
I never trade.
Oh, don't.
I always buy art from other artists. I never
Great.
trade because I value their work.
Great.
I'm not saying I shouldn't say that because it seems like trading is a bad thing. I'm not saying that.
It's not, but because they're valuing your work as well. But it is.
Because this is quite rapid questions. I can't quite remember the name of the artist. She's going to kill me.
That's okay.
Yeah, but
Photo,
no, photograph, and it was a wonderful photograph of an industrial area, just pallets all piled up. I thought it was just absolutely amazing. Just a good scale.
Beautiful. Favorite breakfast? What do you eat in the morning?
Oatmeal and berries.
What time of the day do you feel most productive?
What time of the day?
Yeah.
I would say mornings for sure. Like I'm done by 10. I think that's the old man talking there, but yeah, I'm done by 10 unless I'm working on a series or something.
Yeah.
Then I'll just keep working until I
dig in.
fall asleep. Yeah.
This is a bigger question, but we're down to the last 5. Would you believe that's 35 questions going that fast?
Wow. Okay.
This big one is: do you ever doubt that new inspiration is going to find you?
No.
Okay.
No, I've been actually accused of being too confident. It's an odd thing because I've dealt with other artists. I expect for a while I was expecting it of them that they would have such belief in their work they never would have doubt, because I can't see having doubt in yourself in regards to, well, the art you create is yours, so why would there be any doubt? Because there's never a comparison to anybody else.
Right.
But it's all about yourself. So no, there's never any doubt at all.
Again, this is just gold for artists to listen to, because there's so much confidence in, confidence building and confidence in self that's necessary. Tell us about the one studio tool that's absolutely necessary for you.
Studio tool. Masking tape.
I was just going to say, I know what it is. It's the damn masking tape. Okay. That's it.
When I go to the art supply stores like Mona Lisa, Kensington, or whatever, they're like, they can see me coming. Yeah. I tell they want to close the door, like, that's that tape guy. He's going to take our whole stock, and we can't get it anymore because of COVID. Like, so I now actually curb it. I'll only take 4 or 5 of each roll, and I'll leave. Yeah.
What's your perfect city to live
in?
In the world.
It's strange. When I was out in Ontario, I absolutely loved Toronto. And I know that's 50-50 with most people, because I've been in Montreal and I love Montreal. Mm-hmm. I've lived 12 years out on the West Coast. I love Victoria. For some strange reason, when I was in Toronto, I just felt at home. And it's the only time I've ever felt at home outside of being in England.
Yep. I know that. You walk into a city and it's yours. I get it. Which painter changed your perception of what art could be?
An odd one, because here I am talking about moving away from the storytelling. Yeah. But Richard Attila Lukács.
Oh.
And his figurative painting. Really? I think the best exhibition. First of all, I saw an exhibition at the Nickel.
Yeah.
His work, which is just.
I saw that. Was it it was a grad show almost, wasn't it? Just after.
Yeah, just after, and I had a full circle moment because I also exhibited at the Nickel like 10, 15 years later. So I had a full circle moment. But with his imagery, I remember going to an abandoned warehouse in Toronto because they were going to have a show at the University of Toronto, and they didn't have enough room for it. So one of his collectors said, well, the hell with this. So he took his collection and he put it in this building that was going to be torn down the next week. So you had all these amazing homoerotic, figurative schoolboys and all of this stuff. But the smell was so bad, the lighting was so bad, but it was the whole experience of the show. And you go into a small room and you see these small children climbing the stairs, and it's awkward to look at. But then when somebody walks into that environment, you feel like you've been caught. Looking at, yeah. And then I went out to the main gallery, and there was a woman in a fur coat, and she went up to this painting, and her dog took a shit on the floor in front of the painting. And she said, yeah, I don't like that one either. And then she walked away, and somebody from the shadows scurried out, picked up the poop, and then disappeared. So the whole experience itself was, but I loved his work. I absolutely.
I'll never ever be able to get that image out of my brain now. It's brilliant. We are on the last three questions. Did you grow up with any art in the home? You already talked about the wallpaper. Otherwise, was your dad no art?
No, I mean, you got to consider my one brother is a police officer, my other brother is a principal, and then my youngest brother is a house painter, and I call him the painter in the family. He's the painter, but no introduction to art at all. There was no culture at all.
Have you ever kept one of your own paintings?
Yeah, because here's an interesting thing. My teacher, Sandor, he said, invest in your own work. So I try to keep what I consider my best work, even if it's in a series, because I invest in myself.
Incredible advice. The last question. Have you ever doubted your choice of profession? Have you ever doubted this life that you've chosen as an artist?
No, but any artist, it's not so much doubt, because it's just so difficult. It's a difficult life. And you come to a point with the realization of, well, this is a life you've chosen and this is it. And there is no going back.
Yeah.
But that choice is not easy because it takes you out of the mainframe, so to speak. Yeah. Right? So you're separate from society, although you're reflecting on society. And yeah, it's tough sometimes. It just wears you down. But then you have those moments, right? And for me,
what buoys you again when you have that moment? What's the thing that draws you back out?
Oftentimes it's seeing art by someone else, yeah, and how they apply. Like there are a lot of people that their application, it's more their application so much in the painting. I know Chris is there and Dale's there, and they're like the way they apply paint. A lot of artists I look at, and then young artists. I just mentioned like the Neverland group. It's a group of young up and comers, I would say. And then I like to, because there's more of an honesty attached to it, and it's not trying to be anything else beyond making art. So it reminds you of, oh yeah, that's what I do, that's what I'm about. So you kind of go back to who you are and start producing your work. It's got nothing to do with it, outside influence in that way.
It's perfect learning to leave off with. I threw my questions into the garbage can at the end of that because it was like,
I was thinking, was that 35 questions or 240 because I don't have enough of this, just saying.
No, that's the perfect way to end it, because again, you've offered so much, and at the same time, it goes quickly, so it doesn't feel like it goes on and on. We're going to talk about the work. So I'm just flashing on to a quick artist statement about the Remnant series, but I think people would love to hear you talk over that as well. Just talk about why the Remnant series happened.
Well, as it says, the definition there, small remaining quality of something or trace remaining. And that's all of us in our lives right now. Mm-hmm. It's just like, this is a new world. And, even going forward, it's a new world. But there are parts of our past that still remain. And it's funny because we're living in history as opposed to the present time. Because what's happening now will be remembered in history as that time period of COVID and how it changed us socially and culturally. So it's the Remnants is a glimpse of something, a reminder of something. It's like looking back fondly, but then at the same time, what do you do with all those bits and pieces moving forward, right? Because it's unknown for all of us. It's unknown for all of us. So that is about what the Remnant series is about.
Tell people too, if you can, in the midst of COVID, in the beginning, in the very beginning and in the midst, you created a series of work. It was entirely about isolation, together in isolation. And so this really was a rollout from that series. They almost echo each other in
well, they did, because the isolation series was all of us just first introduction to it. And so it became about, a lot of the conversation was positive.
Yeah.
Because people were saying, well, I'm getting rid of this. I didn't need that.
Yeah.
So it was about, with the work itself was reduction. So the whole work was about reduction and symbols, but flat color, flat shapes, and just keep it as simple as possible. And then with the new work, what I did was pick up like those that you see on the screen there, that table, that shadow, and that ground is on the other series.
From the isolation series.
I brought it over, as well as the bowls, and also it's not in there, but houses from the old series. So I've referenced it that way too. But then you get the background, which is about 20-25 layers of paint that's sanded during to create, and then wallpaper on top, and then sanding it to create this history.
Yeah.
So we have that look back, right? And then
incredible depth to them, because I didn't even recognize it from photo till I saw them in person. And there's just an incredible, the historical kind of feel of them. It's amazing. And again, to juxtapose those with the isolation series, which were that exactly as you said, it's like reduction, simplicity, but the carry through is so obvious. So we'll try to actually bring out one or two of the pieces that were left from the last series so people can really understand this.
okay.
Yeah, it is.
And then the other thing is that the images outside of the flower for Vincent there, the images have the chops again, have the Roy Lichtenstein chops, the Andy Warhol bananas, and then the butterflies, and then the paper airplanes, because it's all fragile. It's not a permanent, none of those are permanent things, and they have a lifespan. Like the idea of a butterfly, it's so fragile, right? There's the houses. I see houses. So you've got butterflies and paper airplanes, and so everything is just so temporary. And yet you have this history it's not necessarily a history, but it's a created history.
Yeah.
That's manufactured. I actually made that history. But because we don't know how the book we've lived it, but how people are like, and down the road when they look back at this history, it'll be rewritten in a different way.
How we experience it right now is what's mattering. I think it's the only marker right now. So these are individual pieces. I wanted you to speak to some of the kind of the background, foreground, all of the elements that make each piece quite unique, and it's kind of the narrative. So I've just kind of picked, I haven't done the whole series, but I've picked a few, and Flowers for Vincent was quite different than all the others.
Yeah, Flower for Vincent is different. It's almost not a part of the series after it was done. I thought about it. And again, it was a tribute to Vincent van Gogh. And because he was very influential in the work I was looking at earlier too, again, through that apprenticeship. And I wanted to give back to him. So I took a flower out and put the flower in, but of course it's very abstracted. They can be, in other paintings, they're snowflakes, right? Whatever the painting is, what I wanted to represent. Again, this is going to be the same for every one of this series, because I wanted repetition throughout the work. Yeah. So you see the table and the shadow and the color and how it's applied is identical. In fact, I measured everything out, and everything is absolutely identical. So throughout the whole series, except the wallpaper, which you cannot control. You can't control that because you build up the layers and you're sanding, and it's like breathing. It's breathing history when you look at it, and even the tactile quality. It looks more tactile than the painting, like the chair, the table, and the floor. But it's actually because it's sanded. It's smooth as glass.
Well, and that's what, if you notice in your studio, that's what I did. The first thing I kept touching it. It's got to mention, it has to, and there's a preciousness that is so not, a part of the real strong iconography. So I wanted, that the paper airplanes were so much in that isolation series, and the clouds, those hopeful symbols. The paper airplane was this lovely, floating hope. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. Letters from home.
The letters from home, right? It's a traditional way of communication, and more meaningful, because it takes time. It takes time to put down the words, as opposed to just an abbreviation or an emoji. It's like, we've lost that. And I think a lot of people got back to it. I've had letters written to me, I've responded as well. And I think it's just a beautiful form of communication. And the house in the clouds, I think that's the most hopeful painting in the whole series. It's about dreaming. So how you look up into the clouds and you see things in the clouds. It's about that moment of just relaxing. The thing, going back to that village of Hesham, in the village of Hesham, one of my favorite places, they had this old church, and then they had stone graves, and it was on the ocean. You would overlook the ocean. And one of my favorite things to do was to lie in one of the stone graves and then look up at the sky. And you asked about what's the most important sensory thing. It was all of them, because you're in the ground and you feel the earth itself and it engulfs you. And then you've got the breeze coming off the ocean and the sound of the ocean, and then the blue sky and the clouds. There are blue skies in England every now and then. So it's just like the blue skies and then the clouds floating over. And someone once asked me in an interview, when did you know you were an artist? I would say that moment. It's an odd moment to say, but that's when I knew I was an artist. It was just that experience I wanted all the time, just where you're in everything, not separate from it.
It just brings so much more. To hear you talk about each piece brings so much more to the experience. And I have the favorite of the cherry picker, not specific to the image, though it's a really strong image. But yeah, it's this kind of, Dawn and I talked about this piece, my husband and I talked about this piece at length, because it's like, is it Seeds of Hope? Is it what is it? What's going on? But it was so, it just resonated so deeply.
Well, the thing I hadn't mentioned is that in every one of the bowls in the paintings, one of the objects that's in the bowl is also spilled over. So that, because the idea that we're all in this together, but then we're an individual as well. And the cherry pickers is interesting. And you and Don are right about that, because is that bird taking or giving?
That's what I don't know.
I actually don't know either, right? Because the flight pattern is something, to me, it looks like it's depositing, but it could be taking it away too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, and there's a tension in that one. And that was one of the last two that I did, that one and the bluebirds. So this kind of again came afterwards, but I can see where now the future series goes.
It definitely is a drop-off point.
There's that movement in that painting that's just kind of indicating where the series is actually going to go next.
And what about learning to fly? I was just interested in the image.
Learning to fly is about the idea of us having to make these birds. These are origami birds, and make these birds because we have to create our own future. And and it's not a given, and it's just like this nesting at home and then flying, eventually flying away, right? And that's why the birds are the way they are. They're there preparing to fly, and you'll notice they're going in opposite directions.
I know so many of us are at that exact point. You're forced out and you're having to relearn all you knew about being out in the world. And this is definitely a time. So I took a moment to put some of these in situ so people could sort of understand scale and just how they fare in an environment on their own. And I just feel like each one of them holds up, but the resonance is going to be so personal. It's so individual. And we found that with the first series as well. They were a huge hit, and some of them went in groups. I think there was one group of 3 that went together, and it was because people were creating their own narrative from these beautiful stories. I wanted to leave enough questions. Barry, we're literally 10 minutes from the end, and it's time to ask questions, if that's okay with you. Are you okay with people open? I'm going to open the floor up to everyone. So you can turn your mics on, and you're welcome to ask questions of Barry.
Hi, Barry, it's Paula.
Hi, Paula, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Good.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering about the palette in this series. Can you talk about the coloration and where, what perhaps the association is, or where that's coming from? They feel I don't know, they're so resonant, and I'm wondering what your intention was with that.
Right. Well, the thing is with the colors, as I said, it's also the application and what lends itself to shape. So the shadow and the table and then the ground is again in reference to that earlier series, but more muted. The other series was much more vibrant, and I'm still not sure because this is so fresh to me why I decided to mute everything and to kind of like downplay it. I think I wanted for people to be comfortable with it, because you know how a color like that, look at the colors behind me,
Yeah.
it can be distracting, or it can take away from what it is you're trying to say, because people say, well, bright color or amazing image. I wanted to mute everything so that the story was easier to come to. So it was, easier to read and kind of like Cheryl said earlier, just, kind of sit with the image for a while. And so it's not over the top.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm intrigued by the depth of color, the chroma, and the combination of that blue and that wicked pink with gold leaf. It's just so compelling.
Right. Yeah, that's a great pink, eh? And
Yeah.
and Cheryl's going to be upset because I also got that out of a can.
Wow.
I have a question that's on the chat.
It's funny because when I'm stuck, I'll actually go to an art supply store and I'll look for boards, because I only ever work on board. Look for boards that will kind of dictate to me what's next. I've just started to get into circles and how it's got no edge. And so, whatever is dictated to me. And it's the same thing with the colors. Like I'm like putting it on walls, and people think I'm designing my home, and it's just like, no, this is going to go well with this. But yeah, I've got to mute it. And it's funny you mentioned the gold leaf. The gold leaf is that reference to, again, my studying and my apprenticeship, but at the same time, it's got that delicate quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely just a beautiful material.
So it is gold leaf.
It is all gold leaf, yeah, and gold leaf is in every one of them. Yeah.
Excellent. That was one of the questions in the chat. I was supposed to ask you, is it really gold leaf?
Yeah, well, it's really gold leaf, and repetition is important to me. That's why the formats are identical. That's why a lot of the shapes are identical. The way of handling, you look at those. The way of handling the paint is identical, because what happens with repetition is the original meaning starts to lose its meaning, and it can become something else. And there's repetition also is comfortable, but at some point it can become uncomfortable if you just keep repeating something over and over again, because then you're starting to think to yourself, am I missing something? So there's a bit of an edge to it as well. I like that balance between the two.
And yet each one of them introduces something new. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. It's Melissa. Hi.
Hey, Melissa, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Long time no see.
Yeah. I'm curious about your repetition of images that you've been talking about. And I've known you a long time, and I've seen a lot of these popping up in your work. Is there any of these that you're wanting to let go of, that you feel don't need to be repeated in your art? Funny enough, the chops. The chops just seem, again, I mentioned Richard Attila Lukács, and you're familiar with Richard Attila Lukács too, and the meat quality, because he had the meat paintings he did when he was at school, and he put them in the front window, and he was known by that, and it's so tactile. And I'm trying to remove tactile, and chop in itself references tactile, and just by what it is. No matter how you paint it, it's just like, well, that's a tactile object. So I'm trying to remove it because it's taken away a bit from the story. But no, I'll keep repeating a lot of the images because I'm lazy and I just don't want to find any more.
They just come. There's always an introduction of something else, and it changes everything. There's this little new introduction with that repetitive quality. But love to know why repetition matters for you. That's great. That was great to hear it. Anybody else have questions for Barry? Just going to check the chat to see.
Okay, well, I can go. I don't have any critique or anything, but I'm gonna question you on dominoes.
Oh, okay.
Have you painted dominoes yet? And if not, why or when? Because there's possibilities of everything in the domino.
Right. And Chrissy, I have, because like you saw that series. And
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, no, the original, no, they're not dominoes.
Oh,
They're referencing dominoes by splitting the format in half.
one of those.
Yeah, right. So then I split them in half. So you have the numbers in one and the numbers in the other, but instead of numbers, I used imagery.
Okay, such trickery.
Yeah, and if you look at that format, it's the same format. It's very domino-like, right? It's got
Yes.
this familiar format.
Yes.
But so I do, because one reads off the others, and oddly, I never did mention this before. If you put paintings a certain way with that series,
Yeah.
it's like a dominoes. I have to connect the numbers.
Mhm.
So the bottom of one will match the bottom or the top of another. So you could turn a painting upside down to match it. So it's very much a domino series. Cheryl's going,
What the
You
hell?
have to rehang the gallery before Saturday. No, that's awesome. That's really cool. I loved listening to your everything, and I'll give you my notes on Saturday.
okay, cool. I look
Right.
forward to it. Thanks.
It was fun. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else? We're at 2 minutes to 8. If anybody has any questions, you are welcome to them.
Chrissy also asked Richard who, the
Richard,
artist who
oh.
influenced.
I answered her in a private message, Richard
Oh.
Attila Lukács. So I sent you the private message, Chrissy, so you had the spelling.
Hey Barry, it's Scott from Ontario here.
Hey Scott, how you doing? How's
Not too
the
bad.
surgery worked out for you?
Dental surgery is always terrible, but it's working out.
Okay.
You're a man of weird formats. I think most people know that. So what's with the 48 by 24 for this series, and I guess for the adjoining series as well?
Because one is half of the other, right? And so it's about balance. So it's instead of actually, so I try and keep it from it actually being a painting. So when I go with a 24 by 48, one is the exact half of the other. So there's that balance that's unseen as well. And it also lends itself well for just individual stories. So you have an individual story on just one tablet, but then you start to repeat that tablet. So then you create a whole book or a whole vocabulary or whatever you want. But I like to use that format because it's immediate. It's just like intimate. It's just like one, and then another one, and then another one. And then that becomes, the series becomes the actual painting, not just a singular piece. So that's my answer to you, Scott.
Thanks, Barry.
Okay.
Thanks for talking as well. It was a good talk, Cheryl and Don. It was good. It was great.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks for attending, Scott. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. It was, I hate to say that the Zoom format's a little comforting for me still. And it's only because sometimes the conversation in person is stunted by being interrupted by people and by all of the kind of weird flightiness of being back in groups of people. And I feel like this is a great opportunity to delve a little deeper and to hear more, that feels like a real personal conversation. And I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come again. And we'll be back next 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now with Lucy Baus doing our next talk, and then Chrissy Nickerson after that in December. It's got a beautiful show coming up, and she's done this format before, and there's no lack of surprises due in each one of these Zoom talks. So I hope you'll join us. You can see this Zoom talk recorded on our website on the preview lounge. You'll see in the preview lounge, there's a whole array of kind of more in-depth information around Barry's show. And you'll see a three-dimensional tour of the exhibition itself is going to pop up tomorrow once it's hung and I've got it filmed. And then you'll also see this recording up on the preview lounge tomorrow, sometime midday. So tell your friends, get everyone to watch it, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Right. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks, everybody. I never know how to shut this down. So there's always this moment where you're like, oh, God.
You want me to shut it down?
Yeah, would ya? And just stop the recording.
I will.
Thanks. Thanks, Bibs.